The world around Ethan Cole was noise and light. The roar of engines bounced off the walls of Monte Carlo, turning the narrow streets into a tunnel of sound. The air shimmered with heat rising off asphalt, a mixture of burning rubber, gasoline, and salt from the Mediterranean breeze. It was the final lap of the Monaco Grand Prix. The circuit glowed under the late afternoon sun, the air thick with tension and champagne fumes. Ethan's crimson car sliced through the tight corners with surgical precision, the chassis trembling under the strain. He was leading barely half a second ahead of Luca Marino, his teammate, his friend, his shadow. "Cole, keep it steady. Tires are blistering," came the voice of his race engineer through the radio, calm but taut. "I know," Ethan muttered, sweat dripping from his brow inside the helmet. One more lap. He could feel the tires dying beneath him, the car twitching with each acceleration. But he could also feel the finish line, taste it. Years of sacrifice, pain, and obsession compressed into these final turns. The entire world narrowed to the racing line ahead. The crowd became a blur, just a shifting field of colors. Then came Saint Devote, the first corner after the pit straight. The turn was tight, almost cruel in its geometry. Every driver feared it. "Easy, Ethan. Don't push too hard," the voice in his ear warned. But Ethan wasn't listening anymore. He saw Luca's shadow in his mirrors, closing the gap. They had grown up together. These two, rivals since the karting days, brothers by fate and fire. Luca had always been the calm one, Ethan the storm. He gritted his teeth, took a deep breath, and dove into the corner. That's when it happened. A flash of water shimmered across the asphalt. A thin, invisible patch of oil and rain. The back end of Ethan's car kicked out violently. His reflexes snapped in countersteer, throttle modulation, correction. The car wobbled, caught itself barely. But Luca had already committed to the inside line. The two cars brushed. Just a kiss of carbon fiber at 180 kilometers per hour. Enough. Ethan's rear tire clipped Luca's front wing. Luca's car spun sideways, skidding toward the barrier in a spray of sparks. Time fractured. The world slowed into silence. Ethan's breath caught. The image of Luca's car flipping, hitting the wall, igniting an orange flame. It seared itself into his mind like a brand. "Luca!" The radio exploded with static and screaming voices. Ethan's car fishtailed across the track, barely missing the wreckage. The crowd gasped in one unified breath, a sound like thunder. Marshals rushed in. Sirens blared. Ethan slammed his brakes and jumped out before the car even stopped moving. His boots hit the ground, and he ran toward the inferno. The heat hit him like a wall unbearable. He could see the outline of Luca's car, mangled, smoking, alive with fire. He tried to reach it, to pull open the cockpit, but the flames pushed him back. The smell of burning fuel and plastic filled the air. Someone grabbed him from behind, shouting in French, "It's too late! You can't!" He screamed. It was not a word. It was a sound torn from somewhere deep inside, something primal. When the fire finally died, the track was silent. Only the sea whispered nearby. Luca was gone. The world didn't stop turning. The cameras didn't stop rolling. By evening, every news station in Europe ran the same slow-motion footage. Ethan's red car clipping Luca's wing, the explosion, the disbelief in his eyes. Headlines called it tragedy on the track, Cole's fatal mistake, the fire of Monaco. Ethan didn't speak at the press conference. His team issued a statement. His sponsors withdrew. The governing body cleared him of criminal negligence, but absolution meant nothing. The next day, he walked out of the paddock and never came back. Months passed. Los Angeles swallowed him whole. Gone were the photographers, the flashing lights, the roar of engines. In their place, the dull hum of ceiling fans, the smell of cardboard pizza boxes, the steady rhythm of small, unremarkable nights. He rented a small apartment in Echo Park, lived off his savings until they ran dry, then found a job, delivering pizza for a local shop called Tony's Slice of Heaven. The irony wasn't lost on him. A man who once piloted a machine worth millions now drove a rusting hatchback held together by duct tape and faith. But he didn't care. Any driving still made sense to him. It was the only thing that ever had. The car responded to his touch. The tires still spoke to him through the vibrations in the steering wheel. He could feel the road the way a musician feels a melody. It was quiet, anonymous, safe, until he closed his eyes. Because every time he did, he saw the flames again. On some nights, when traffic was low and the rain fell in silver streaks, Ethan would take the long way back to the shop. He'd cut through the empty streets downtown, past the shimmering puddles under neon signs, and let the car slide just a little, a whisper of a drift. Nothing wild, just enough to feel the edge. He never pushed it. Not anymore. He told himself that was over, that the track, the adrenaline, the sound of engines screaming like demons belonged to another man. A man buried under guilt and ashes. But the muscle memory never left. Neither did the silence afterward. One morning a letter arrived. No return address. Just his name written in a neat, unfamiliar hand. Inside was a photograph, an old one from their rookie year. He and Luca, standing side by side in their race suits, arms around each other, grinning like idiots. On the back, scrawled in ink, "You're still my brother. Keep driving." He stared at it for a long time, then folded it carefully and placed it in the glove box of his delivery car. Ethan's days blurred together. A haze of streets, apartment numbers, and the smell of mozzarella. People rarely looked him in the eye. To them, he was invisible. Another worker in a red jacket, balancing cardboard boxes with a polite smile. But every once in a while, someone would pause. "Hey," a customer said once, squinting. "You look kind of familiar. You ever been on TV or something?" Ethan forced a grin. "Nope, just a guy who drives." He avoided racing broadcasts. But one night, in a pizza shop buzzing with noise, the television above the counter flashed with familiar faces. The new generation of F1 drivers. The host was talking about the legacy of tragedy and triumph, showing old clips. Then he saw it. His car. The crash. The fire. He froze, a pizza paddle still in his hands. Someone changed the channel. Ethan stepped outside, heart hammering, breathing hard as if he'd just come out of the cockpit again. He leaned against the car, head bowed, rain beginning to fall. He could feel it again, the weight of the helmet, the vibration of the engine, the scream of the tires. He didn't know it yet, but fate wasn't finished with him. That night, he took a delivery out past downtown, to a condo complex near the freeway. The streets were slick with rain. He tapped the steering wheel to the rhythm of the wipers, headlights cutting through the mist. He didn't notice the silver Lamborghini idling a few blocks away. Not yet. Ethan parked, grabbed the pizza, and ran up the steps. The customer, a young woman with tired eyes, opened the door and smiled. "Thanks. I didn't think anyone would come out in this weather." "Storm's not that bad yet," Ethan said. As he turned to leave, thunder rolled across the sky. The city glowed with wet reflections, lights bending in the puddles. He climbed into his car, started the engine, and began the drive back to the shop. The rain grew heavier, hammering against the windshield like nails. He reached an intersection, traffic light blinking yellow, and slowed. Across the crossroad, the Lamborghini revved once, twice. Its driver, a young man in a tailored suit, checked his mirror, smirked, and punched the accelerator. Ethan had no warning. The silver machine sliced through the red light and slammed into the side of his hatchback. The impact was brutal, metal folding like paper, glass exploding in a white burst. Ethan's head snapped sideways. The world became a whirlpool of sound and motion. He tasted blood. The car spun halfway around and came to rest on the curb. The pizza boxes flew open, one landing upside down on the dashboard. Through the ringing in his ears, he heard a soft groan. Marco, the teenage helper riding with him, barely conscious, blood streaking down his forehead. The Lamborghini idled for a heartbeat, its headlights glaring like eyes. Ethan tried to move, but his seatbelt held him tight. He looked up just in time to see the sports car reverse slightly, then, unbelievably, accelerate away into the night. He stared after it, disbelief turning into fury, then into something colder. The sound of the receding engine echoed in his skull. He tore off the seatbelt, kicked open the crumpled door, and stumbled into the rain. His breath came in clouds. His hands trembled. But his eyes were sharp again, the eyes of a racer. He turned back to Marco, who was stirring weakly. "Stay here. Help's coming." Then he slid into the driver's seat, twisted the ignition. The old engine sputtered, coughed, then roared reluctantly to life. Ethan tightened his grip on the steering wheel. The blood on his temple dripped down his cheek. "You picked the wrong guy to hit," he whispered. He slammed the gear into first. Tires screeched, spraying water into the night. And just like that, after 3 years of silence, Ethan Cole was racing again. The chase began with rain, neon, and rage. The Lamborghini's taillights gleamed ahead like twin stars, guiding him into darkness. Ethan's car slid through puddles, suspension groaning, but he controlled it like an extension of his own body. The city was a blur, intersections flashing by, wet asphalt reflecting chaos. The radio hissed static. Marco's shallow breathing somewhere behind him. Ethan's mind, though, was somewhere else entirely. Every instinct he'd buried came alive again. Every turn was a calculation. Every skid a heartbeat. He remembered the old feeling, the edge of control, the dance with gravity, the line between life and catastrophe. The difference now was simple. This wasn't a race for glory. It was justice, and maybe redemption. Rain exploded against the windshield, 1,000 silver bullets hammering in rhythm with Ethan's pulse. The city ahead was a maze of reflected light, red, white, gold, and the trembling blue of police sirens somewhere far away. The Lamborghini cut through the storm like a blade, its taillights twin comets streaking through darkness. Ethan's battered hatchback, dented, leaking, engine wheezing, followed like a shadow that refused to die. Each time he shifted gears, the sound was wrong. The clutch squealed. The gearbox protested. But Ethan coaxed it forward, smooth as silk. His hands were steady, movements fluid, precise. Years of muscle memory guided him. Every fiber of his body remembered how to chase. He saw the Lamborghini swerve through an intersection, narrowly missing a taxi. Ethan followed. Handbrake, countersteer, drift, the back of the car sliding out perfectly, water spraying in an elegant arc before catching traction again. It was madness. It was beautiful. Inside the Lamborghini, panic had begun to set in. The driver, no older than 25, with slicked back hair and the arrogance of wealth, gripped the wheel so hard his knuckles were white. His name was Adrian Vale. He'd just left a club in West Hollywood, drunk on power and whiskey. He hadn't meant to hit anyone. He just didn't want to stop. Now, through the rain-smeared mirror, he saw something that shouldn't have been possible. A pizza car keeping pace with a 600-horsepower supercar. "What the hell?" he muttered, heart pounding. He floored the accelerator. The Lamborghini howled, gears screaming as it launched forward, tires slicing through puddles. Ethan's eyes narrowed. He downshifted second gear, then punched it. The little hatchback leapt forward, engine roaring in defiance of physics. He cut between lanes, inches from the median, headlights flashing like lightning. The two cars danced through Los Angeles like ghosts in a storm. They passed the glittering windows of downtown skyscrapers, reflections of neon swirling across wet asphalt. Rain turned every streetlight into a halo. The world outside became a blur of motion and color, like a fever dream painted in gasoline. At one intersection, Adrian tried to lose him. He took a sharp left into a narrow alley, tires screeching as he skidded past dumpsters. Ethan followed without hesitation. His instincts took over. Throttle feathered, weight transfer, brake tap, handbrake pull. The car rotated perfectly through the corner, a flawless drift that carried him inches from the brick wall. The hatchback straightened just in time to see the Lamborghini fishtail on the slick pavement ahead. Ethan almost smiled. The first in years. For a fleeting moment, he wasn't a delivery man anymore. He was Ethan Cole, the phantom racer, and the city was his circuit. The rain, the light, the chaos. It all disappeared into rhythm. His heart synced with the engine. His thoughts dissolved into pure motion. He was home again. The chase spilled out onto the freeway. The storm intensified, wind slamming against the cars like invisible fists. Adrian's Lamborghini roared down the empty lanes, its speedometer climbing past 150. Ethan kept his distance, close enough to see the target, far enough to avoid the spray. He was thinking now, calculating. The Lamborghini had power, but it was useless if the driver didn't know how to use it. Ethan could see the man's fear in his erratic movements, the way he braked too hard into corners, oversteered, overcorrected. A rookie mistake. He waited for the moment. It would come. It always did. When they hit the next curve, the Lamborghini lost grip, rear tires hydroplaning. Adrian panicked, yanked the wheel too hard. The car spun halfway, skidding across lanes, slamming into the guardrail with a shower of sparks. Ethan slammed his brakes, steering smoothly to a stop. The Lamborghini's engine coughed, still alive, smoke rising from the hood. The driver stumbled out, dazed, his pristine suit drenched in rain. Ethan killed the engine. The silence that followed was deafening. Only the storm speaking, whispering through the overpass. He stepped out, boots splashing in puddles, his breath misting in the cold air. Lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating the scene in stark white. Adrian turned toward him, wide-eyed. "Please," he stammered, backing away. "Look, man, I didn't mean to." Ethan said nothing. He just kept walking, slow and steady, eyes locked on the man who had almost killed his friend. Adrian slipped, fell onto the wet concrete. "I can pay you. You want money? I have money." Ethan stopped in front of him, rain dripping from his hair. He looked down at the trembling man, his own reflection flickering in a puddle, the ghost of who he'd been. His voice was calm, almost gentle. "You almost killed a kid. I didn't see. You didn't care." Adrian's lips trembled. "Please, don't hurt me." Ethan crouched slightly, eyes level with his. "You think I'm going to hit you? You think I'm like you?" He reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, dialed 911, and tossed it onto Adrian's lap. "You call. You tell them what you did." Then he turned and walked back to his car. Behind him, Adrian fumbled with the phone, sobbing, voice breaking as he spoke to the dispatcher. Ethan didn't listen. He didn't need to. He slid behind the wheel, hands gripping the leather. For a long moment, he just sat there, watching the rain slide down the windshield, blurring the city lights into streaks of color. The adrenaline began to fade. What remained was something else. Not rage, not triumph, but clarity. He looked down at the glove box. The photo was still there, Luca's smile frozen in time. Ethan exhaled slowly, eyes closing. "You'd have done the same," he whispered. He started the engine again. It coughed, sputtered, then settled into a soft hum. He put the car in gear and drove away. Not fast, not slow, just enough to feel the rhythm of the road again. By the time he reached the edge of the city, dawn was breaking. The storm had passed, leaving behind a sky streaked with pink and gold. The streets glistened like liquid glass. Ethan pulled over near a gas station and stepped out. The air was cool, clean, the smell of rain lingering. He watched the horizon, where the first light touched the hills. Somewhere behind him, sirens wailed, distant, fading. He wasn't running from anything anymore. He leaned against the hood, closed his eyes, and for the first time in years, the silence felt like peace instead of punishment. Then, across the street he saw a billboard. "Race of Legends. The Grand Prix returns this summer." His gaze lingered. The bold letters gleamed under the sunrise. A younger version of himself smiled down from the poster, helmet tucked under his arm, eyes full of fire. Ethan let out a small, disbelieving laugh. The sound felt strange, rusty. He shook his head, but he couldn't look away. Something stirred in him, something he'd buried with Luca. Not glory, not ego, just the pure, unfiltered love of the race. The feel of control at the edge of chaos. The truth of who he was. He climbed back into the car. The seat creaked. The dashboard light flickered weakly. He put the photo of Luca beside the shifter, looked at it one more time and smiled faintly. Maybe it's time, he murmured. He started the car. The engine purred like an old friend waking from sleep. Ethan pulled onto the empty road, shifting through gears with effortless grace. The tires hissed softly against the wet pavement, a quiet symphony of motion. The city disappeared behind him. Ahead lay only the open road, endless, waiting. He pressed his foot down gently on the accelerator, feeling the familiar vibration beneath his hands. And for the first time in 3 years, Ethan Cole felt alive again. The morning after the storm smelled of wet asphalt and exhaust fumes. The city was quiet, washed clean by the rain, but every puddle reflected fragments of chaos from the night before. Twisted metal, flashing lights, blurred faces. Somewhere near the downtown overpass, the wreckage of a silver Lamborghini was being towed away, its hood crumpled like paper. The police tape fluttered in the wind, and the news vans gathered like vultures around a carcass. Ethan Cole didn't see any of it. He sat in a corner booth of a 24-hour diner on the east side of Los Angeles, still wearing his soaked jacket. His car was parked outside, dripping rainwater onto the cracked asphalt. The neon sign above the window buzzed faintly, stuttering between red and pink. He stirred a cup of black coffee that had long gone cold. The reflection in the glass showed a man no one would recognize. Rough beard, tired eyes, an old cap pulled low. He looked like any other man who'd had a bad night. Not like the ghost of a legend. A small television above the counter flickered with morning news. The screen was grainy, the volume low. But Ethan heard it anyway. Hit-and-run suspect apprehended near the I-110 overpass late last night. Witnesses report a second vehicle involved in the pursuit. Sources say the driver of the Lamborghini, identified as 25-year-old Adrian Vale, was taken into custody on suspicion of driving under the influence. The identity of the other driver remains unknown. A shaky phone video appeared. Rain-soaked streets, headlights cutting through the dark. A red car spinning around a corner in a perfect arc of motion. A drift so fluid it looked choreographed. The video froze on the image. Someone whistled at the counter. "Damn," said a trucker between bites of pancakes. "Whoever that guy was, he can drive." Another man laughed. Probably some kid on Adderall. Ethan lowered his eyes, wrapping both hands around his mug. The coffee was cold, but he didn't drink it. The waitress approached, chewing gum lazily. "You want a refill, hon?" He nodded without looking up. "Yeah, thanks." She poured, then glanced at the TV. "Crazy world, huh? You'd think after all those car movies, people would learn not to try that stuff for real." "Yeah," he murmured. "You'd think." She walked away. He waited a long time before looking up again. On the TV, the anchor was smiling now, oblivious to the weight behind her words. Online fans are already calling him the Phantom Pizza Driver, after footage showed the vehicle's delivery sign on the roof. Police have yet to release any statement about this mysterious second driver. Ethan's lips twitched. Not a smile, just the ghost of one. He left a few bills under his cup and walked out into the morning light. The city felt different now. Every traffic light, every intersection seemed sharper, more alive. He noticed the way reflections moved across wet pavement, how the hum of engines rose and fell like waves. He drove slowly, letting the rhythm of the streets carry him. As he pulled into Tony's Slice of Heaven, his boss, Tony Russo, was already outside, wiping his hands on his apron. Tony was a thick man with kind eyes and the voice of someone who'd seen too much but learned to laugh anyway. "Jesus, Cole," Tony said, half laughing, half worried. "You look like you spent the night in a hurricane." "Close enough," Ethan said quietly. Tony frowned. "You okay?" Ethan hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, just a long night." Tony sighed. "I heard about some big crash downtown. Cops said a delivery car was seen chasing a sports car. You didn't see anything like that, huh?" Ethan looked past him, to the small pizza shop with its flickering sign. "No," he said after a pause. "I didn't see a thing." Tony studied him for a moment, then shrugged. "Well, good. Cops are looking for the guy. Whole internet's talking about it." I'm sure they are. Tony clapped him on the shoulder. Get some rest, Cole. You've been running hard. Ethan nodded, managing a faint smile. Yeah, I'll do that. He walked past the counter, the familiar smell of tomato sauce and dough filling the air. The place was quiet. Marco's delivery scooter sat by the door, dented but intact. Ethan paused, remembering the boy's blood on the dashboard. He hoped the kid was okay. He picked up a towel, wiped his hands, and tried to shake the feeling that the world was tilting again, that the ground under him wasn't quite solid anymore. That afternoon, the story spread. Clips from the crash went viral. The Lamborghini hitting the barrier, the red pizza car drifting through rain. Someone slowed the footage, zoomed in, analyzed tire angles, acceleration, control. Forums buzzed. Racing enthusiasts debated in long threads. That turn. No amateur can pull that off. Looks like an F1 maneuver. Could it be Ethan Cole? No way. That guy disappeared years ago. But look at the handling. Look at the drift. Ethan didn't see any of it. He didn't need to. He could feel it. The old world turning its gaze toward him again. A tide he couldn't stop. The next day, he visited Marco in the hospital. The boy was awake, head bandaged, watching cartoons on mute. Hey, Ethan said softly as he stepped in. Marco blinked, then smiled weakly. Hey boss, you're supposed to rest. Yeah, well, I suck at resting. Ethan chuckled quietly and pulled up a chair. How are you feeling? Like a pizza that fell off the oven. You'll live then. Marco grinned, then hesitated. They said, someone chased that guy. The one who hit us. Ethan's expression didn't change. Did they? Yeah. People online are calling him the Pizza Phantom. Catchy. Marco looked at him closely. It was you, wasn't it? Ethan stared at the blank wall. Get some sleep, kid. Thought so, Marco whispered, closing his eyes. Ethan stayed for a few minutes longer, listening to the faint hum of machines, the soft rhythm of rain against the window. Then he stood, placed a folded note under the boy's phone, and left. At night he drove. Not to deliver, not to chase, just to feel the road again. The city was quieter now, the storm gone but its ghost still lingering. Streetlights stretched long golden lines across the asphalt. He rolled down the window, letting the wind hit his face. The smell of rain mixed with exhaust, a scent he'd known all his life. He found himself drifting toward the coast, toward the cliffs above Malibu, where the Pacific crashed endlessly against the rocks. He parked, engine idling, and stepped out. The sea was vast and black, the sky a fading bruise of purple. He leaned against the railing, listening to the waves, the ticking of his cooling engine. For the first time in years, he felt something close to peace. Then, behind him, tires crunched on gravel. Car door shut. Footsteps approached. Thought I'd find you here, said a voice he hadn't heard in a long time, calm, deep, edged with cigarette smoke. Ethan turned slowly. A man stood in the dim light mid-40s, wearing a worn leather jacket, eyes sharp but kind. It was Ray Donovan, his former race engineer, the man who'd been on the radio the day Luca died. Ethan's jaw tightened. How'd you find me? Wasn't hard, Ray said, walking closer. You were never good at disappearing. Besides, the whole damn internet's talking about some maniac in a pizza car driving like a pro. I figured it had to be you. Ethan said nothing. Ray looked at the old hatchback. That thing? Jesus. From Formula One to delivering pepperoni in a tin can. Ethan gave a dry laugh. Fitting, isn't it? Ray leaned on the railing beside him. You know, some of the guys still talk about you. The Monaco crash. They never blamed you. We all knew it was a freak accident. It wasn't a freak, Ethan said quietly. I pushed too hard. I always did. Ray sighed. You pushed because that's what made you great. Great doesn't bring him back. The waves crashed below, spraying cold mist into the air. Ray lit a cigarette, took a drag, and exhaled smoke toward the sea. You know they're reopening the Race of Legends this summer. Big event. All the old names. Sponsors are going crazy. They even called me. Ethan turned his head slightly. You told them I'm dead? I told them you were done. They didn't believe me. Ethan looked back at the horizon. They shouldn't. Ray smiled faintly. So you saw the billboard too? Huh? Silence. Only the sea answered. Ray flicked the cigarette into the dark. You don't have to do it for them. Do it for yourself. Or for Luca. He wouldn't want you rotting in some back alley with a delivery bag. Ethan's grip tightened on the railing. You think coming back fixes anything? No, Ray said softly. But hiding sure as hell doesn't. They stood there a long time. Then Ray placed a small object on the hood of Ethan's car. A pair of black leather racing gloves, worn but clean. Just in case, he said. You still know what to do with these. He turned and walked back to his car. Ethan didn't move. When the sound of Ray's engine faded into the distance, he picked up the gloves. The leather felt familiar, molded to his hands like memory. He slipped them on. They fit perfectly. The next morning, Ethan returned to work. The day felt normal again. Deliveries, receipts, laughter from the kitchen. But everywhere he went, he noticed eyes lingering on him. A stranger's phone tilted his way on the street. A teenager whispered to his friend, pointing. By evening, another video surfaced online. Clearer this time, taken from a dashboard cam. It showed his car drifting around a curve, water spraying in a halo of motion. A watermark read, Phantom Pizza Driver. Full footage. Within hours, it had 1 million views. At Tony's shop, the phone rang non-stop. Reporters, bloggers. One man even offered to pay $10,000 for an interview. Tony unplugged the phone, shaking his head. What the hell's going on, Cole? Ethan wiped his hands on a towel. Guess people are bored. Tony looked at him, narrowing his eyes. You sure you don't know anything about this? Ethan hesitated, then said quietly, If I did, I'd still be just a pizza guy, right? Tony stared for a moment, then nodded. Yeah, guess so. He turned back to the ovens. Ethan exhaled slowly, staring at the dough spinning under the rolling pin. The rhythm soothed him, circular, endless, predictable. But his pulse betrayed him. It was the rhythm of engines again, of laps and corners and heartbeat measured in RPM. The gloves waited in his car, sitting on the passenger seat like a secret. That night he couldn't sleep. He stood on his balcony, staring down at the city lights, rivers of gold and red flowing through concrete veins. Somewhere down there, someone was watching the video of him driving. Someone was remembering the man he used to be. He closed his eyes. The roar of the crowd came back. The blur of Monaco. The sound of fire, Luca's voice. He whispered into the dark. I'm still driving, Luca. The next day, a letter appeared under his apartment door. No address, just his name written in careful handwriting. Inside, a single line. If you ever want to stop running, meet me at Willow Springs. No signature. Ethan read it twice, then folded it into his pocket. The next night he started the car and drove. The city lights fell away behind him, replaced by the open desert. The air grew dry, the stars cold and sharp. The road stretched endlessly ahead, black ribbon under silver moonlight. He didn't know what waited for him at Willow Springs. Maybe a trap, maybe redemption, maybe nothing at all. But he knew one thing. He was done hiding. He tightened his grip on the wheel, downshifted once, and pressed his foot on the accelerator. The old hatchback roared, engine screaming into the night, headlights carving through the dark. The sound was not the cry of a broken man anymore. It was the heartbeat of a racer reborn. The desert unfolded before him like a silent ocean of dust and wind. The headlights of his car cut 2 narrow beams through the darkness, illuminating the cracked asphalt that stretched for miles. The road was empty, save for the occasional tumbleweed rolling lazily across the lane. The sky above was ink black, scattered with distant stars, cold, patient witnesses to the return of a ghost. Ethan Cole drove in silence. The hum of the engine filled the void, steady and low, like a heartbeat he hadn't heard in years. The photo of Luca was still tucked into the glove box, though he didn't need to look at it anymore. He could feel his old friend's presence beside him, as if every gust of wind that brushed his window whispered, "You're almost there." Willow Springs wasn't much to look at. From a distance, it appeared like a skeleton of a forgotten dream. Fences half collapsed, stands empty. The track itself cracked and pale under the desert moonlight. But to racers it was sacred ground. It was where many careers had begun, and where some had quietly ended. He slowed as he approached the entrance gate. The sign was rusted, the letters barely visible. Willow Springs International Raceway. He rolled the window down, inhaling the smell of oil, dust, and memory. The air carried a faint echo of engines long gone. He killed the headlights, letting the darkness swallow the car. For a moment he sat motionless, listening to the wind, to the creak of cooling metal, to the faint pulse of his own thoughts. Then, in the distance, a single light flared to life. It came from a garage at the far end of the pit lane, warm, yellow, alive. A silhouette stood by it, outlined against the glow. Ethan's fingers tightened on the wheel. He shifted into gear and rolled forward slowly, gravel crunching under the tires. As he drew closer, the figure came into focus. A man, lean but solid, with a slight limp, a helmet in one hand. The glow from the hanging bulb above the garage revealed a weathered face, older, lined with time, but unmistakably familiar. "Welcome back, Cole," the man said, his voice low but steady. Ethan cut the engine and stepped out, boots crunching against sand. "Didn't think you'd actually be here." "I wasn't sure you'd come," the man replied. Ethan looked around the empty track. "You always did have a thing for dramatic invitations." The man chuckled softly. "You haven't changed. Neither have you, apparently. Age just hides better on me," he said. Then he tossed the helmet lightly, and Ethan caught it without thinking. "Figured you might need that." Ethan turned it in his hands. It was matte black, simple, the kind racers used for test runs. No sponsors, no colors, no names. Just function. He looked up again. "So, you gonna tell me why I'm here? Or do I have to guess?" The man crossed his arms. "You've been running, Ethan. Not from the cops, not from the press. From yourself. You think hiding behind delivery routes and cold pizza makes you free? You're choking on the silence." Ethan exhaled through his nose. "You think a few laps around a ghost track are gonna fix that?" "Maybe not," the man said. "But it might remind you who you are." Ethan stared at the helmet again. The smooth surface reflected the dim light, broken by the faint outline of his face. A stranger staring back at him. He thought of Luca, of Monaco, of the flames, of the years he'd spent driving nowhere, trying to outrun guilt that never aged. "Why now?" Ethan asked quietly. The man's eyes softened. "Because the world's already looking for you again. You can't stop the noise, Ethan. But you can choose what it says." He turned toward the track, gesturing. "It's all yours." Ethan hesitated for a long moment, then slipped the helmet under his arm and walked toward the car. The engine coughed once, then came alive, a rough, uneven growl echoing through the still desert air. The sound felt wrong in the silence, too loud, too human. But as the revs built, something inside Ethan aligned with it. He pulled onto the track slowly, letting the tires find the worn racing line. The headlights cast long arcs across the cracked pavement. First lap slow, careful, remembering. The car shook on the straights, its old frame not built for this kind of speed. But it held. The steering wheel vibrated faintly, familiar. The turns came back to him, the way the tires bit, the way the rear drifted just enough to demand respect but not fear. His body remembered what his mind had forgotten. Second lap, faster. The wind roared through the open window, carrying the taste of dust. He leaned into the corners, shifting smoothly, the rhythm returning, heartbeat syncing with machine. The sound of the engine became music again. He saw flashes of memory in every curve. The bright flags of Monaco, Luca's grin in the mirrors, the smell of burning rubber, the rush of pure velocity. And for the first time since that day, the memory didn't burn. It moved with him. He accelerated down the back straight, eyes fixed on the horizon. The car trembled, a blur of motion and noise, but he held it steady. The world narrowed to a single line of focus, the track, the desert, the sky. He was back. By the fifth lap, the engine began to protest. A grinding whine, a hiccup in the throttle. Ethan eased off, letting the car slow, coasting to a stop by the pit lane. He shut off the engine. The silence rushed in, huge and holy. He climbed out, breathing hard, sweat clinging to his skin despite the cold. His heart was pounding, but not from fear. From life. The man was waiting at the edge of the pit. He smiled faintly. So? Ethan removed the helmet, wiped a hand across his face, and looked at the track shimmering under the first light of dawn. I'd forgotten what it felt like, he said quietly. To be fast? Ethan shook his head. To be free. The man nodded, understanding. They stood there for a long while, neither speaking, watching the sun crawl up over the desert hills. The air shimmered with gold and heat. The track glowed, alive again. Finally, the man said, "There's something you should know." Ethan turned. Words out. "Someone from the Race of Legends committee's been looking for you. They want the pizza driver in the lineup. They think it's good PR, redemption story, mystery man, the whole 9 yards. Ethan laughed once, dryly. PR. Yeah, that's what I need. You don't have to say yes, but they're coming. And if you don't tell your story, they'll write it for you. Ethan looked down at his hands. The gloves Ray had given him were slick with dust and oil, worn but solid. I'm not sure I have a story left. You've got one, the man said softly. You just stop telling it. He turned and walked toward the garage, leaving Ethan alone with the rising sun. Ethan looked out at the horizon. The desert wind blew across the track, whispering through the fences. He could still smell the fuel, the burnt rubber, the faint electricity of movement. He closed his eyes. Luca's voice came back, faint and warm. Keep driving. When he opened them again, the sun was full above the hills, and the track blazed like gold. He slipped the helmet back on, slid into the driver's seat, and started the engine once more. This time he didn't drive to remember. He drove because he could. Because the silence between races was worse than the noise. Because somewhere, deep in the sound of the tires, he could still hear his friend laughing beside him. The car accelerated down the straight, and as it did, a cloud of dust rose behind it, curling into the morning light like smoke from a new beginning. The day had ripened into heat. The air above the asphalt shimmered like liquid glass, and the silence of the desert had transformed into a low hum. The whisper of wind against metal, the pulse of an engine idling somewhere in the distance. Ethan sat inside the car with the door open, one hand resting on the steering wheel, eyes unfocused. He wasn't thinking of racing anymore. He was thinking of motion, the purity of it, the truth of it. It had always been the only place he'd ever felt honest. Footsteps echoed softly across the pit. The man from before, the one who'd summoned him here, returned, carrying 2 cans of fuel and a small black case. He set them down beside the car. You're running low, he said. Ethan nodded. This car's not built for this track. Neither are you, the man replied, smiling. But here you are. Ethan leaned back, letting the desert wind wash over him. You think they'll really come looking for me? They already are, the man said. The world loves a resurrection. Doesn't matter if it's holy or just noisy. Ethan smirked faintly. I'm not a saint. No, the man said. But you used to be something better, a racer. The words hung in the air, soft but sharp. Ethan closed his eyes. The desert around him was vast and indifferent, yet it seemed to listen, to wait. Do you ever think, he said slowly, that maybe I don't deserve to come back? The man looked at him for a long time, then crouched by the open door. You ever think maybe that's not your call to make? Ethan's fingers tightened on the wheel. Luca deserved better. He did, the man said. But he also knew the risk. You both did. You can't spend your life punishing yourself for something that every racer understands when he puts on the helmet. Ethan didn't answer. He just stared at the horizon, a line so sharp and clean it could have cut him in half. Finally, the man said, You should go. Rest. The next time you come back here, don't come alone. Bring your ghosts. Make peace with them. Ethan managed a small nod. The man patted the roof of the car. "You still drive like a poet," he said, turning to leave. When he was gone, Ethan sat there for a while longer. The desert light changed, shifting from gold to amber, from day to dusk. Shadows stretched long across the track, thin as wires. He could hear the sand moving, whispering against the tires. He thought about the years he'd spent hiding, about the nights delivering pizzas through endless streets, the sound of the engine the only heartbeat that mattered. He realized that even then, he'd never stopped racing. He'd just changed the course. He reached into the glove box and pulled out the photo, the one of him and Luca. The edges were creased, faded, the image smudged by time. He studied it for a moment, thumb tracing the curve of Luca's grin. Then he set it on the dashboard and whispered, "Guess I'll see you on the next lap." He started the engine one last time. The car rumbled awake, shaky but determined. He drove a single slow lap around the track, the sky burning red behind him. He didn't push the car. He didn't drift. He just followed the racing line, clean, deliberate, faithful. When he crossed the finish mark, he lifted his foot off the gas and let the car coast until it came to rest under the rising moon. He turned off the ignition. The silence returned, soft and immense. For a long moment, Ethan sat motionless, hands on the wheel. The air inside the car felt heavy, sacred somehow. Then he reached for the gloves on the passenger seat and slipped them off, laying them gently over the photo. He whispered, "Thanks for the ride, partner," and stepped out. The night had come alive again. Coyotes howling in the distance, the sound of a truck on a far-off highway. The stars above shimmered like scattered metal flakes under floodlights. He looked around the track one last time. The ghost of the man he'd been stood somewhere in the corners, watching. For once, Ethan didn't turn away. He nodded as if acknowledging the truth. Then he walked back to his car, tossed his helmet into the trunk, and headed toward the exit. The desert stretched endlessly before him, dark, vast, and full of quiet promise. The world beyond Willow Springs waited, full of noise and light, ready to remember his name even if he didn't want it to. As he drove, the radio flickered to life. Static at first, then a voice. Rumors continue to swirl about the mysterious driver involved in last week's Los Angeles chase. While authorities have not confirmed the identity, footage has drawn comparisons to former F1 star Ethan Cole, missing from the circuit for nearly 3 years. Sources close to Cole's former team say, he turned the knob, shutting it off. The static died, but the words lingered in the cabin. He drove in silence for miles, the desert highway rolling under him like an endless ribbon. The headlights cut through the dark, their glow bending and stretching with each curve. Somewhere beyond those lights lay the city, the people, the noise, and perhaps the next race. As he crossed into the outskirts, he saw a billboard rise from the side of the road, half-lit by failing bulbs. Race of Legends. Los Angeles qualifiers. 1 week only. A phone number glowed beneath it. He didn't slow down, didn't stop, but his eyes lingered on the sign as it passed behind him. The corners of his mouth lifted slightly. Not a smile. Not yet. Something quieter. Something alive. By the time he reached the city, dawn had started to break again. The light poured over the streets like forgiveness. Ethan parked in front of his apartment, shut off the engine, and sat in silence. He looked at his hands, scarred, strong, restless. They still trembled faintly, not from fear, but from anticipation. Then he took out his phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in years. When the line clicked open, a familiar voice answered, "Ray Donovan." Ethan exhaled. "It's me." A pause. Then, "About damn time. You still know people at the track?" Ray's chuckle rumbled through the phone. "You thinking what I think you're thinking?" "I'm not sure," Ethan said. "But I think I'm done hiding." "Good," Ray said. "Because the world's been waiting." Ethan hung up, leaned back in the seat, and closed his eyes. Outside, the city was waking. Horns, voices, sunlight creeping through the blinds. The sounds that used to annoy him now felt like music. He opened his eyes, the faint glint of determination flickering there. Tomorrow maybe he'd visit Tony, tell him the truth. Maybe he'd go back to Willow Springs. Maybe he'd just drive until the road ran out. But one thing was certain. He was done being a ghost. The world might still call him the phantom driver, but for the first time, Ethan Cole felt real again. He started the car once more, not to go anywhere specific, but simply to move. The tires rolled forward, steady, sure. The city unfolded ahead like a track waiting to be conquered. And somewhere, faintly, beneath the hum of the engine, he thought he heard Luca's laugh, clear, proud, eternal. The sound followed him into the dawn. The morning broke too bright, too alive. The city was a living thing again, restless and loud. Sunlight spilled through half-closed blinds, striking Ethan Cole square in the face. He opened his eyes to the sound of voices outside. Too many of them. Cameras clicked. Someone shouted his name. A horn blared, followed by the whir of drones overhead. He sat up, the sheet sliding down his chest. The air felt heavy, tense, charged with the electricity of exposure. He moved to the window slowly, part of him knowing what he'd see before he pulled the blinds apart. A small crowd had gathered on the sidewalk below. Reporters, camera crews, a few fans holding homemade signs. Flashbulbs went off when they spotted him. Ethan Cole, is it true? Were you the driver in the chase? Why'd you disappear after Monaco? Do you plan to race again? The questions collided into each other, indistinct and hungry. He closed the blinds and exhaled. It was happening again. The world had found him. He went to the kitchen, filled a glass with water, and stood there staring at nothing. His apartment suddenly felt smaller. The peeling wallpaper, the half-open pizza boxes, the faint smell of oil from his jacket. The phone on the counter buzzed non-stop. Unknown numbers, press agencies, racing magazines. His name was everywhere again, and it didn't even feel real. He let it ring until the sound became part of the background noise. Then, a new tone. The one he hadn't heard in years. Ray Donovan, incoming call. He picked up. Yeah. Morning, Starboy, Ray said. You look out the window yet? I did. Hell of a welcome party. Can't say I missed it. Well, congratulations. You've officially resurrected yourself without even trying. Everyone wants a piece of the pizza phantom. Ethan rubbed his temples. They still think it's a rumor? For now. But the footage is clear. The hands on that will, the control in the drift. You might fool civilians but not drivers. They know. I didn't do it for them. I know you didn't. But it doesn't matter. You're in the bloodstream again, kid. Once the world smells fuel and redemption, it doesn't let go. What do you suggest? Ray hesitated. You've got two options. You either keep hiding until the noise fades, or what? Or you race again. Ethan's jaw tightened. That's not happening. Ray's tone softened. It already is. There was silence between them, thick and electric. I'll swing by later, Ray said. We'll talk properly. Don't go anywhere. He hung up before Ethan could respond. Outside, the voices were getting louder. Someone knocked on his door. Hard, insistent. Then again. Mr. Cole, Channel 7 News. Just a few questions. Ethan, SPN wants a statement. He turned away, walked to the bathroom, and stared at his reflection. The man in the mirror looked older, but not defeated. His eyes, once dulled by guilt, burned now with something steadier. Not pride, not anger, but inevitability. He splashed cold water on his face, grabbed his jacket, and slipped out the back door through the narrow stairwell. The city was chaos. News vans clogged the street. Digital billboards replayed the viral clip of the chase. His red car drifting through the rain like poetry in motion. The caption beneath read, "Who is the phantom driver?" He pulled his cap lower, kept walking. His boots echoed against the wet pavement. Every corner, every sound, every burst of light from a camera felt like the pulse of a memory trying to reclaim him. He ducked into Tony's shop through the back alley. The familiar smell of flour and garlic hit him instantly. Tony looked up from the counter, eyes wide. Jesus, Ethan. You trying to give me a heart attack? Ethan closed the door behind him. Did they come here too? Tony gestured toward the front windows. Outside, reporters were pressed against the glass. "You tell me." "I'm sorry," Ethan said quietly. Tony sighed. "Don't apologize. Just tell me the truth. Was it you?" Ethan didn't answer immediately. He took off his cap, running a hand through his hair. "It doesn't matter." Tony studied him, then nodded. "Yeah, guess that's answer enough." He walked to the oven, grabbed a fresh slice, and handed it to him. "Eat something. Whatever's coming, you'll need your strength." Ethan took it, managed a faint smile. "Thanks, Tony." As he ate, Tony leaned against the counter, voice low. "You know, I've seen a lot of drivers in my time. Guys who talk big, drive faster than their brains. But what you did, that wasn't just driving. That was art. Art gets people killed," Ethan said. "So does fear," Tony replied. The words hung there for a while. Outside, the crowd was growing. By late afternoon, Ray arrived. He pushed through the mob, flashing his old credentials, and slipped inside the shop. "You're trending in 17 countries, he said, setting a tablet on the counter. "Look at this, #EthanCole, #ThePhantomDriver, #RedDrift. Ethan barely glanced at it. "I didn't ask for this. No one ever does. But this isn't about asking. It's about momentum. You can either crash or steer." "Ray, hear me out," Ray interrupted. "The Race of Legends committee called me. They're offering you a spot. Not a qualifier, not an exhibition, the main grid. They want you to headline the return." Ethan blinked. "They don't even know if I'm still capable. They don't care. They've already sold the story, the fallen hero, the comeback, the ghost of Monaco. You're not just a driver anymore. You're a myth they can sell tickets to." Ethan looked down, voice low. "You think I should give them that?" Ray shook his head. "No. I think you take it from them. Take back what they stole from you, your name, your choice, your story. You don't owe them glory. But maybe you owe yourself peace." Ethan looked out the window. The crowd beyond the glass was chanting now, the sound like waves crashing on concrete. "I'm not ready," he said. "Maybe not," Ray replied. "But you're alive. That's more than you were last week." Ethan's breath trembled. The world outside had turned into a storm, and for the first time in years, part of him wanted to step into it. "Think about it," Ray said, standing. "I'll handle the press for now, but they won't wait forever." As Ray left, Ethan turned back toward the ovens. Tony was still there, watching. "What do you think I should do?" Ethan asked. Tony smiled faintly. "You already know. You wouldn't be asking if you didn't." Night fell again, and with it came the silence. The reporters drifted away. The city lights blinked like restless stars. Ethan sat alone on the roof of his apartment building, the hum of traffic below fading into white noise. He lit a cigarette, though he hadn't smoked in years. The smoke curled upward, pale against the dark. He thought about the track, about the way the air had felt against his skin at Willow Springs. He thought about Luca, his laughter, his final words. He whispered to the night, "You told me to keep driving." A gust of wind swept through, cool and dry, almost like an answer. He closed his eyes and saw it. The race, the lights, the impossible beauty of speed. Not as fame, not as escape, but as truth. The thing that had always defined him, even when he'd tried to deny it. He flicked the cigarette away, stood and looked east, where the desert lay waiting. The decision wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was already alive in him. At dawn, he packed a single duffel bag. Helmet, gloves, a small photo, nothing else. As he stepped outside, the street was quiet. The news vans were gone. The world had moved on, or maybe it was just holding its breath. He unlocked the hatchback, the same car that had carried him through rain and fire. He ran a hand over its hood. "One more ride," he said softly. The engine turned over with a growl. The sound felt different now, not desperate, not haunted, but purposeful. He pulled out of the lot, merging into the awakening city. The highway opened before him like a ribbon of light. The sun climbed higher, washing everything in gold. He didn't look back. By the time he reached the edge of the desert, the world behind him was already shrinking. Just noise, static, memory. Ahead, The horizon was clean and endless. He pressed his foot down, and the car responded with a roar. The wind rushed in through the open window, warm and wild. His heart steadied. His grip tightened on the wheel. And for the first time since Monaco, Ethan Cole smiled. It wasn't joy. It wasn't defiance. It was something quieter, acceptance. He didn't know what waited for him at the race of legends. Fame, failure, forgiveness, maybe all three. But he knew he would face it on his terms, at full speed. The desert blurred around him. The sky widened. The road sang. And in the sound of the tires against the earth, he heard it again. Faint but unmistakable, Luca's voice, laughing, alive. "Let's see what you've got left, brother." Ethan laughed, a real laugh this time, raw and clean. "All right," he said to the wind. One last race. The horizon swallowed him whole, the car becoming a streak of red against the endless gold of the morning. The desert sun bled over the horizon like molten gold, washing the racetrack in color and heat. The gates of the race of legends stood open, guarded by banners flapping in the wind. Reporters crowded the entrance, microphones raised, cameras flashing like sparks. The noise of the world had returned in full force, an orchestra of engines, shouts, and adrenaline. In the middle of it all, a single car rolled through the paddock. It wasn't the sleek machine of a superstar. It was an old red hatchback, engine tuned just enough to sound alive again, its paint dull beneath the sun. The chatter dimmed for a heartbeat when people saw it. Someone laughed at first, then fell silent when the driver's door opened. Ethan Cole stepped out. He wore a plain black racing suit. No sponsors, no logos, no entourage. The crowd leaned forward, breathless. The noise of cameras surged again, each flash freezing him in fragments, pieces of a myth brought to life. He looked thinner than the photos, older, but his eyes, those cold, blue, impossible eyes, were the same. Somewhere in the stands, a boy with a cast on his arm whispered to his father, "That's him." Ethan didn't wave. He didn't smile. He just nodded once to the world and walked toward the pit lane. Ray was waiting there, clipboard in hand, cigarette behind his ear. "Hell of an entrance," he said. Ethan smirked faintly. They were expecting a ghost. "Well," Ray said, clapping his shoulder, "give them something better." The air was thick with the smell of fuel and rubber. Engines screamed on the practice track, sending heat rippling across the asphalt. Ethan walked through the paddock slowly, absorbing it all. The chaos, the rhythm, the nervous laughter of mechanics, the sound of tools clanging against metal. It was a language he hadn't spoken in years, yet it came back instantly, like remembering the lyrics to an old song. As he approached his garage, a group of reporters swarmed. "Ethan, why now? Is this a comeback or a confession? Do you have anything to say to Luca Marino's family?" He stopped at that one. For a moment the crowd hushed. He turned to face them, his expression calm. "I never stopped saying things to them," he said quietly. "I just stopped saying them in public." Then he stepped into the garage and closed the door. Inside, the noise faded to a heartbeat. His new car waited under a tarp, small, matte black, unbranded. Ray stood beside it, arms crossed. "Built her from scratch," he said. "No sponsors, just steel, fire, and prayer." Ethan ran his hand along the curve of the hood. "She's beautiful. She's fast," Ray corrected. "And she's yours." Ethan pulled off the tarp. The machine gleamed like shadow and thunder, its body compact, dangerous, alive. It wasn't a monument to glory. It was a weapon forged for truth. He saw his reflection in the paint, blurred but real. Ray watched him quietly. "You sure about this?" Ethan nodded once. "Yeah." "Then let's make it count." Qualifying day arrived like a storm. The grandstands overflowed. Commentators screamed into microphones. Old rivals shook hands in public, then glared in private. When Ethan's name appeared on the starting board, the arena erupted. Ethan Cole, number 27, independent. The red number glowed on the screen like a scar reborn. He slid into the cockpit, fingers tracing the wheel. The gloves creaked softly as they tightened around his hands. He closed his eyes and let the world fall away. In his mind, there was only the road, the line, the rhythm, the breath before a curve. Ray's voice crackled through the radio. You don't need to win. You just need to drive. Ethan smiled beneath the helmet. Copy that. The light went green. The car exploded forward. The tires screamed against the track. The engine sang in perfect fury, and Ethan's world collapsed into motion. Every corner was a heartbeat. Every straight a confession. He wasn't chasing trophies. He was chasing the part of himself he'd left burning in Monaco. The others were faster, newer, but Ethan had something they didn't: clarity. Where they braked, he trusted. Where they hesitated, he flowed. He found the rhythm, the old song beneath the roar. By the final lap, he wasn't first, but he was flying. The crowd was on its feet, cameras flashing, the sound of his name swelling like thunder. When he crossed the line, the cheers rolled across the desert like a wave. Ray's voice came through the radio, thick with pride. You're in the main race, kid. Ethan laughed for the first time in years. It wasn't joy exactly, it was release. That night, the paddock quieted. The stars burned hard above the desert. Ethan sat outside his garage, helmet beside him, staring at the empty track. The asphalt glowed faintly under floodlights, a black ribbon stretching into nowhere. Footsteps approached. It was Tony holding 2 paper cups of coffee. Had a feeling you'd still be here, Tony said, handing him one. Ethan smiled. You drove all the way from L.A.? Tony shrugged. Didn't want to miss history. They sat in silence, sipping coffee that tasted like dust and courage. After a while, Tony said, You know, Marco's watching this on TV. He told everyone at the hospital that his boss is a superhero. Ethan looked down, smiling faintly. Kids got bad taste in heroes. Maybe, Tony said. But he's not wrong. The silence returned, softer this time. The desert wind carried the faint echo of engines from far away, like ghosts racing under the stars. You think this changes anything? Tony asked. Ethan thought for a moment. No, but maybe it changes me. Tony nodded. That's enough. When he left, Ethan stayed. He pulled the photo of Luca from his pocket and set it on the hood of the car. The paper fluttered in the breeze. Tomorrow's for both of us, he whispered. The day of the final race came hot and blinding. The track shimmered under the noon sun, the air vibrating with the collective heartbeat of thousands. Flags waved. Engines roared. The world leaned forward. In the lineup, Ethan's car stood between 2 corporate machines painted in chrome and neon. He felt the pressure of eyes, the weight of expectation. But inside the helmet, he was calm. Ray's voice came over the radio. Remember, she's not built to last 100 laps. Drive her like she's alive, not immortal. Like me, Ethan said. Exactly like you. The lights flickered, red, 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 then green. The cars launched like bullets. The world turned into blur and thunder. Ethan's focus narrowed to a razor's edge. Every corner was a memory. Every straight was a heartbeat. The first lap was chaos. Shouts over radio, smoke, heat. But by the 5th, the rhythm took over. The old hunger returned, tempered now by grace. Halfway through, a rival clipped his rear tire. The car wobbled, threatened to spin. The crowd gasped. But Ethan caught it, hands moving with impossible precision, drifting through the slide with elegance that made time stop. He regained control, straightened, and pressed on. Still got it? Ray breathed into the mic. Never lost it, Ethan replied. The final laps blurred together. A crescendo of motion, dust, and heart. He wasn't first. He didn't need to be. The last corner came fast, the sun flaring gold across his visor. For one perfect instant, the track, the sound, the light, all of it aligned. He saw Luca's car beside him, in his mind, running parallel, laughing through the radio like old times. Ethan smiled, pressed the throttle one last time, and crossed the finish line. The roar of the crowd drowned everything. Cameras flashed. Ray's voice broke through, hoarse with emotion. You did it, Ethan. You did it. Ethan slowed the car, coasting along the straight. He lifted his visor. The wind hit his face like forgiveness. He parked near the stands. Reporters rushed forward, shouting, asking questions he couldn't hear. He climbed out, unhurried, and raised his helmet. Not in victory, but in acknowledgement. The cheers swelled until the air trembled. He looked up at the sky. "We finished it, Luca," he whispered, and somewhere in the blur of the crowd, he could have sworn he heard an echo. "Yeah, we did." That evening, long after the crowd had gone, the desert grew quiet again. The lights dimmed one by one until only the stars remained. Ethan sat on the edge of the track, legs dangling over the pit wall, his car cooling beside him. Ray joined him, 2 beers in hand. He handed one over. "You didn't win," he said. "I wasn't racing them," Ethan replied. Ray nodded. "You were racing yourself." "Yeah." Ethan smiled softly. "And I finally caught up." They drank in silence, the night wrapping around them like a soft engine hum. When Ray left, Ethan stayed. He looked at the photo of Luca one last time and placed it under the seat of his car. "Keep an eye on the road for me," he said. He stood, brushed the dust from his suit, and walked toward the horizon. The sun was long gone, but the sky glowed faintly where it had set. The wind rose, carrying with it the faint smell of gasoline and rain. Ethan stopped, closed his eyes, and listened. The world was still. No cameras, no noise, just the memory of speed and the echo of a laugh. He smiled, and in that quiet, after years of running, guilt, and ghosts, Ethan Cole finally felt peace. The story didn't end with fire or applause. It ended the way all great races should. Not at the finish line, but in motion, in silence, in grace. Somewhere beyond the desert, a red car would start again tomorrow, carrying a man who no longer ran from the past, but toward what waited ahead.